Now, when this show was announced, I was just kind of like, okay, I guess. Was it really needed? No. But there was room for an interesting story to be told. You know, it could have been something really engaging. And well, we get our story. Now, I don't think it's awful like some people are saying, but it's far from great and far from the quality I wanted it to be. Now, on paper, the story simplified is pretty solid, with Obi-Wan being forced out of hiding for a mission, only to then have the heat of the Empire on him, leading to a cat and mouse chase between Kenobi and Vader. However, in execution, there was a few problems. First, I'm going to touch on the plot. Obi-Wan having to come out of hiding to save Leia was something I didn't expect, but I enjoyed. But to me, it went on too long. I felt he should have completed his mission saving Leia earlier, which is the catalyst for the Empire being on his tail, with the rest of the story being him shaking the trail. But I did like how he had some involvement with the early stages of the rebellion. Now, his first meeting with Vader was underwhelming. I enjoyed the setup with Vader luring out Kenobi by hurting innocents, but when they actually meet, the tension just feels off, as it starts as a weird little game of hide and seek. Then when they do fight, I think Vader should have been angrier, relentless, like a slasher villain, audibly angry. He just felt too calm for the situation, if you ask me, especially after reuniting with the guy who chopped his legs off. Now, the second meeting in the finale improved tremendously, giving us a Vader bland with rage, as well as an emotional conclusion to a pretty great duel between the two. I just wish it didn't cut to the other scene, as I feel it could have been even more captivating if we just stayed with that scene beginning to end. But I know Star Wars does have the history with intercutting battles. Okay, now on to the characters. Now, I'm glad to say the title character himself, Obi-Wan Kenobi, is done exactly how I wanted, starting out as a shell of his former self in a depressing, hopeless cycle, but then throughout the show growing back into his old self, regaining his abilities as a protector, leader and Jedi, all combining for him to re-become the hopeful version we all know. One of my favourite parts being where we get to see him step back into his role as a general when helping the rebels. It definitely feels like it's the he's back moment of the show. Also, Kenobi's resolution with Vader was really well done, as he forgives himself in a weird way for what Anakin has become. Also, just Ewan McGregor back in the role is a win, and he still knocks it out of the park as the character. Now on to Darth Vader. Other than the few issues I mentioned earlier, he was pretty good. I enjoyed how he became more blinded by rage and frustrated as the show went on, but I think this should have gone further. As I mentioned, I think he should have started off a bit like this when first reuniting with Obi-Wan, so by the end of the show he would be even more impatient, frustrated and careless, somewhat like he was when he was Anakin. We did get Hayden Christensen back in the role, but I wish they used him more, because what we do get in flashbacks and the broken mask was great. There's just not a lot of that, and honestly I would like to see a Vader show with him, maybe getting into his mind at this point in the saga. Now, Rever is sort of the elephant in the room, and I really like the idea of a Jedi after revenge on Vader, but the revelation came too late in the show. I feel if we'd known her motives a lot earlier, it would have been a lot better, and we'd have been more invested in her story. Also, a minor thing that bothered me is how they make her seem smart, but they just do that by making everyone else dumb, which is always a really poorly written way to do that. I think this character could work, but not in this show. I would have rather spent the time with Vader, or if the series was longer than 6 episodes, her story wouldn't feel as shoehorned in. Now, the rest of the cast do an okay job. No one's really exceptional, but standouts for me were young Leia, who I think did a really good job of feeling like a more childish version of the character. Also, surprisingly, the Grand Inquisitor, who I know a lot of people were skeptical of going into the show, but the actor does a great job of making him feel like this mustache-twirling villain with the right amount of cartoonish evil. Now on to one of my biggest problems with the show is its production. For context, Mandalorian and even Book of Boba Fett look close to, if not movie level, whereas Kenobi felt somewhat cheap. It didn't look cinematic a lot of the time, feeling quite flat. I can't pinpoint the problem. I don't know if it's the directing, cinematography, lighting, colour or what, or all of them together, but this just has an amateur feel, like a really good fan film, but this isn't a fan film, it's meant to be the real deal. Overall, this show was unfortunately just okay, which is frustrating because it had all the pieces to be great. Now, it's not as bad as everyone's making it out to be, but it still has a lot of problems. And if you like numbers, I'd give it a 5 out of 10. Averagely enjoyable. I feel the focus should have been on Obi-Wan and Vader instead of adding characters in needlessly, taking away time from those characters. The story between those two is interesting enough, and I honestly think it would have been much better as a film than a TV show. Also, I don't get why we keep getting these surrogate father stories with Star Wars. First Mandalorian, then Bad Batch, now this. If all the writers at Skywalker Ranch want adopting, just ask. Alright, that's pretty much it. See ya.